We are the the spirits from the forest grow.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another glorious episode of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. I am your co-host, Jeff May, and you are?
I am your other co-host, Dre Alvarez, found most places as Nerd Numbers. How's it going, Jeff?
Oh, I'm living the dream, baby. And by the dream, I mean I just left a nightmare of this because we are finishing up our season on television specials / made for TV movies with a punishment.
Well, I'm shocked how well these three came together, Jeff. So the theme of season 2 of Nerd, for those listening who haven't connected the dots, is basically made for TV specials based on popular IPs, arguably with some spin-offs and possibly minor characters.
Yes.
And this actually falls right in that wheelhouse because it turns out this movie, I believe, came out in 85 or 86. It was a sequel to another Ewok movie, which we'll discuss in depth, I'm sure, or at least the history of. We talked the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special, which came out in 1985. And then additionally, the Muppet Family Christmas was in 87. So we're basically hitting peak child IP, like pure nostalgia cocaine.
Yeah.
Like for us, I mean, for people that have not watched like the video clips of you on the show or other things like the live streams on Unpopular Opinion, you have just like a shrine to stuff behind you, including like 80s IP as well. So this one I'm very curious about because I have a bigger fondness for this, and this also starts touching on other aspects of my life. I used Wicket as an avatar, as like an AOL instant messenger name for a period of time. So there's probably some more fondness due to that. And I'm curious how much you saw this as a kid, because
I did not.
Okay, so this is perfect. So as an example, let's give a throwback to some other great Jeff IP. If you have not listened to the Alf Christmas special on Gamefully Unemployed,
that we just watched,
go do it. It's amazing. And what I loved is like the start of the show is Dave almost looks like he's just, I mean, there's no camera, but like it almost looks like Dave's looking at you and is just like, Jeff, my God, why?
I think that's his first thing is why. Yeah.
And the answer that you give, which I'm in the same boat, is we're from an era where you might record something off television or be lucky enough to have someone buy you a physical copy, and you just watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, that was just your hobby, watching the thing that you had on tape.
We had the Disney Channel.
Ooh.
And Disney is, of course, associated with ABC. And so I know I recorded like this off of the Disney Channel and watched it a lot as a kid. So we come back to it and I'm like, I enjoyed it, Jeff. The simple question to ask is, well, how much did you see it as a kid? And that's always that is going to come up a lot on the show about nostalgia.
This has a lot of the same energy that you get for the Super Friends episodes of Tom and Jeff Watch Batman that we do, which is the script is very throw a bunch of stuff against the wall, and it's very stream of consciousness. The plot is thin and hackneyed. This is bad. This is a painful thing to watch. They get Kirkland Brand Drew Barrymore to show up here. The Sindel character. She's not against no fault of her own, because she was
4 years old in the first
yeah.
episode. It's worth noting she was not a trained actress. She could not read.
Really?
I don't know. We'll get to
She's
that
not a good actor. And again, she's a child. She's a baby, for God's sake. She's 4, 5, 6 years old max. And it's bad. You have Wilford Brimley playing like a sketch comedy version of a Wilford Brimley character, where all he does is just be like, "Rah, rah, rah," and then that's it. You have terrible puppetry with the Ewoks and terrible costuming. Like, it's sort of like, here's my thing. How can George Lucas create the 3 biggest movies in history, and within an inch of that show up with the most C- special effects? And that to me is, I think, the thing that is the most like, why would you?
I've got two bits of feedback on that last point. So one, what George Lucas would and did say about this is TV versus movies, and there is a huge difference in budget and production.
Then don't do it.
But follow-up, Jeff, and this should tell people of the modern era what we grew up with, Jeff. I think this is really important because you're watching us with 2023 glasses. The Ewoks, The Caravan of Courage, released in 1984, and Ewoks, The Battle for Endor, released in 1985. This one back-to-back Gold Globes or Emmys, one of the two, for outstanding visual effects in a television show.
No.
Yes.
The Golden. Okay, well, here's the deal. Then that just means that that's embarrassing. This is not good.
That's telling you about the state of television in the 80s, Jeff.
Sure, I get that, but here's the other thing though: is if you're George Lucas and you literally conquered movies, he restructured film. Like whether you like it or you hate it, he changed science fiction. He totally changed it. And you can see it. You see it very differently between the movies that came out when you look at what Dino De Laurentiis did when he made Flash Gordon and when Star Wars came out. And you look at how they're two divergent versions of the same genre, right? It's this big operatic play when you look at Flash Gordon, and it's this otherworldly special effects bonanza when you look at Star Wars. So that's what George Lucas does. He does this so much. If you're saying, well, the budgets are different, why would you cheapen your name? And that's the thing that is really upsetting.
Let's do some backstory because it gets even funnier in my opinion.
Let's do it.
And also to your point about like George Lucas, this visionary, but how did he come up with this? I think when you look at a lot of visionaries, what is really important is to think of it more like the 1986 Celtics. This is going to be a running theme. I'm going to keep bringing this up, Jeff.
You
have a collection of great players. Even right now, the Nuggets, Denver Nuggets, have Nikola Jokic, who is the most transcendent offensive big man in the NBA since
unbelievable. Yeah,
he is ridiculous. That being said, his team is probably never going to win a title in the current state with how it is managed. Michael Jordan's best years in the NBA, by the numbers, were when he was not making the finals, and in some cases they made the playoffs, but they made the playoffs with losing records.
Well, that's
great.
That's because you're not. He's going to put up those numbers because he can't rely on other people. I get that.
I've got lots of arguments there, and there's all sorts of fun stuff. Basically, Jordan just had a bad team around him. He got good players, but he got good players when he was older and more beat up. If you would put like a good counterexample to Michael Jordan is Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson, as a rookie, because of lots of weird rules, joined the Lakers with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the all-time winningest MVP, both at that time and then that season when Magic Johnson joined him, and he won another MVP. Mm-hmm. Magic Johnson has an amazing career, and his numbers look consistent across it. So he was playing with transcendent players like Kareem.
Full time, yeah.
And looks great. Michael Jordan, if Michael Jordan had a player like Kareem or Magic or Bird his first year, it would have been ridiculous and destroyed the NBA. But that just didn't happen.
Sure.
All-time greatness requires a collection of talent, and that kind of happens. And what we noticed with George Lucas, and this is kind of the first signs of it, because the prequels are the all-time, is when George Lucas is on a team with a bunch of collaborators and they have to like make cuts and he has to take advice and whatever, that's where we get the empires. That's where we get the great things. And I mean, I think all of us can actually agree, also include the Ewoks, Return of the Jedi is definitely overrated just because,
I mean, it's you could talk more about the rankings of the Star Wars films, and that's fine. Star Wars is best when George is participating in somebody else's directing. Like when you look at like Irvin Kershner doing Empire Strikes Back, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, George Lucas needs people around him to say no, or he needed at this point in time. Who gives a shit?
And
right?
so let's throw out what happened. There's so much in the history of when you say George Lucas needed people to say no. Let's give you some backstory to this.
Now, before we get into that though,
okay,
because I do want to address this because it's important. You brought it up where we say, well, TV and film are different. Yeah, George, you failed at TV with Star Wars. You already did that. You didn't learn your lesson is the problem, because the Star Wars holiday special viewed.
Do you know what this was originally supposed to be called? This was going to be the Ewok holiday special initially.
But
well, not this one, the first one.
He should have. Yeah, but he should have learned at that point in time, like, if you can't do Star Wars, you can't make Star Wars so big and then bring it in live action on something smaller because it's going to look cheap. Now, can you shift it to animation? Absolutely. And that's the smart thing to do. And he eventually
then
did that with Droids and Ewoks.
Those were on the same time, and those are
Yes.
terrible too.
They're terrible, but those are clearly designed for children, not families. Okay. And you're not going to have people looking at these things and they'll look at them differently. Animation was judged differently at the time. And that is very key to understand. Look at Muppets, Muppet Babies, right? If they did Muppet Babies as a Muppet show, it probably wouldn't have been as successful as it was. And you see this constantly. Popular movie, make a cartoon about it, easier to produce, less stressful, whatever. This is an event. This is a tentpole event. This was supposed to change broadcast TV, these two films. Like, let's be 100% honest.
Let's point out the first one, let's just say, got good feedback, good buzz, good reviews, won special effects award, which I know makes future Jeff pain. But essentially, ABC came to George Lucas and said, would you be interested in making a special? And he basically pitched a short Ewok special. Now, the reason, because his daughter liked Ewoks. So basically, he's like, I want to make a movie for my daughter. I'm going to make it about Ewoks. They then went, well, it's got to be long. It can't be 30, 45 minutes. It's got to be a full thing. So, of course, the movies, both of them, so Caravan of Courage, which is the first one, and this one, both feel lengthened because they are supposed to be made for TV events. Yeah. Now, the first one arguably did its job. What George Lucas said is, my daughter likes Ewoks. I'm going to kind of copy Hansel and Gretel. I'm trying to remember the stories. You'd know better than me, but I know there's a lot of popular stories in that vein of like the young warrior goes off and collects a group of people. I think there's like an old Japanese one where he's like got a ball of rice and he collects like a monkey and a dog and an ox and they overtake a castle kind of thing. I know there a lot of
there's so many. That is what Star Wars is.
That's a trope. And I'm saying the first movie is that. The first movie is these two kids have lost their parents who has been kidnapped by a giant monster that I've forgotten the name of. I looked it up before this, but I don't have it in front of me.
The big hairy naked thing, yeah.
Big hairy naked thing, yeah, the official one in like the Star Wars customable card game, right? They're going after it, and they have to collect a collection of Ewoks with varying skills. One's like a woodcutter that's really strong, D&D.
It's building any sort of fellowship.
Yes.
Like you're like, look at Fellowship of the Rings. You have your tank and your archer and your mage. And it's what you do. Yeah, that's the every hero story they usually do.
So the first Ewok movie does that, is successful, does get good praise, regardless of if we in the future hate it, was watched by 60 million people on ABC, highly reviewed, released overseas, makes money in the thing. Sounds great. Now, the wrong problem, right, is George Lucas learns the lesson. I'm going to make stuff for my daughter. So what happens, though, is for this one, Ewoks: The Battle for Endor, his daughter wants another movie, and he's been watching Heidi with her.
Yes, and which you can see the opening scene is Heidi.
So he's been interesting. I haven't seen like the old ones, but
anyway, I mean, it's her and Wicket running through a rolling field.
Yes,
they might as well be in the Alps.
Yeah, so Heidi, for the
Endorian Alps,
is a Pollyanna-ish story, although it was made before Pollyanna, about a young girl who goes and lives with her grandpa or uncle in the Alps.
Yeah,
and
famously Shirley Temple played the
famously
character.
Done by Shirley Temple, but she goes to the Alps and then like lives with him and like breaks his cold heart. And then she also like leaves for some reason to help someone else out, but comes back. So is what it is. It's
George Lucas is good at stealing previous ideas and morphing them into his world. He's good at it. That's what, because George, okay, I like George. I'm friends with his son. Like I like George a lot. But George is like the tails to Spielberg's heads on the coin, where they both know how to reach success. Spielberg does it from an artistic standpoint. Lucas does it from a financial standpoint. Like, he understands the studio system of making money means you can continue making films. And Spielberg's is making great films means you can make money. Like, that's, and obviously I'm summing it up a little too simply, and obviously there's much more subtlety and nuance to everybody's decisions, and it's unfair of me to just cast the aspersions on both of these men, but it's very clear that George Lucas is like, fucking make money, dude. and if you've seen any of the sort of behind the scenes Star Wars documentaries, you know that people know that George Lucas knows how to make money. But there is this artistic integrity aspect of it that I don't think he ever established. There's no auteur aspect to it. And this sounds so douchey of me because I sound like film Twitter, which is one of the worst Twitters. Where I'm just like, he's not really an auteur. It's that aspect where when Scorsese's like, yeah, Marvel, that's not cinema, and everyone, and it's like, no, he's right. Like, these are money making and good for them. But like, let's not pretend that they're making Citizen Kane here. Like, that's not what this is. They're selling toys. Make
And
800 million.
Let's get into the no. Here's where this one gets funny, because it's almost like George Lucas is at odds with himself for a very weird reason.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first movie, very rips off a child's fairy tale. Star Wars well received, whether you like it or not, because you could make arguments, like the first Star Wars movie, Episode 4, parts of it were campy and whatever, but net result, financial success for George Lucas. ABC comes back to him and pitches him two things. One, they're like, would you like to make a live action TV show out of this? And he turns it down. And he basically says, I'm going to do cartoons. That might have been okay, honestly, the live action. And I kind of feel
that was a better decision in my opinion.
Okay, so you're going to respect George. I feel bad because I listened to a lot of Eric Walker, who has done a lot. Eric Walker was Mace in the first movie, and he briefly shows up. He dies really early in the beginning. We're going to talk. Has talked a lot about this, and kind of the rough part is he was cast as the lead in the first Ewok movie, killed off unceremoniously in the second. And at one point, ABC is dangling a live action regular show, essentially with him as one of the leads.
Well, because he's the pseudo Skywalker. He's clearly they just got a new Luke.
And so all the feels in the world for what ends up happening, because you could argue that George really even tanked this in the time, because the first movie ends with this entire family being rescued. The parents being rescued from this big monster, the kids befriending the Ewoks. The Ewoks also help out the kids because like Sindel gets sick and they cure her with medicine they know from trees. So the first movie is like this family is reunited and they're trapped on Endor with the Ewoks. You can just rip off Lost in Space, right?
Yeah,
this
real
family,
Alien 3 energy here.
Never saw, although heard. Anyway.
So the start of Alien 3 is after you've seen Aliens, right?
I haven't seen any of them, but I played Metroid. I'm playing a lot of Metroid. Anyway, it's in the 70s, man.
Okay, Aliens, the James Cameron film.
Yeah, I'm aware of both of them.
Like 1986.
I know all about. What's rough is like with a lot of things, like I'll know a lot about. I've read a lot about. I've just never decided to sit down.
Can you do me a favor and watch Aliens? Can you do me that favor? Like, please.
I'm gonna add it to the list. I'm gonna add it to a warrior of great films you tell me to watch.
Aliens is essentially like I put it with RoboCop. It is essentially Cameron's follow-up.
I'm aware. I know how good it is, and oddly enough, I can quote a ton of it. So anyway,
it's a Vietnam film that takes place in science fiction. But so at the end, you have certain people survive, right? But the studio is now like, we think we want Ripley to be alone again. So they just kind of kill them during the opening credits in a specific way in Alien 3. Spoiler alert. I'm not going to say spoiler alert for a 30-year-old beginning of a film based off of a nearly 40-year-old other film. It's fine. But so what happens is you have these characters, they have this great ethos and it's great. And the interactions are fantastic. Great. We got this. We're moving on. Alien 3 happens and they're like, and they just kill them all immediately.
And here's the major difference of importance though, right? So Alien, all three of those are supposed to be, combination scary action movies. The first one was really marketed as a family movie.
The first Alien?
Yes, the first Alien, Jeff. No, the first Ewok movie, sorry. The first Alien movie and first Ewok movie, both family classics. The second one is such a departure that when ABC comes back, they actually put warnings in front of it and it doesn't get the same reach. So there's the irony is ABC is like, George Lucas, you've done it. I know you hate that fact, Jeff, but they're like, you've done it. 60 million people watch it. They love it. It's award winning.
Again, it's return on investment. Good for them.
And he's
make
just
it good. It just means that it made money.
Yes. But anyway, George Lucas comes back and is like, how about I do it just as crappily as the first one, but with none of the broad appeal that made you money?
Well, this is a cartoon. This is a cartoon that they made live action.
Yes, but as a cartoon that they made live action, it starts with the entire family. So here's the funny thing. We talk about George Lucas's kids' influence. So in the first movie, spoiler, the warrior at the end of the movie gets killed heroically, and he gives his axe to Mace, and Mace uses his axe to kill the big monster. It's a very touching scene. Feel for you. George Lucas's kid was like, I don't like Ewoks dying. So the first movie has to start with these marauders in a big battle with the Ewoks with stakes, and the Ewoks aren't allowed to die.
We don't know that they're not allowed to die.
Okay, yeah, when we're watching. But I'm saying for, us watching new, it's like the Ewoks aren't allowed to die. The only other characters you have at the moment are these 4 people, and one of them has to be the lead. So they just kill off the three primary characters. And in fact, here's what gets hilarious. The parents in the first Ewok movie are played, I'm forgetting, one is the mother on Lost. She's a major character on Lost, which is awesome. So the female mother lead is in that. I forget the male lead. They replace the male father in Ewoks the second with the principal from the Breakfast Club.
Yeah, it's fucking Vernon. Yeah, they bring in Vernon from the Breakfast Club just to shoot him sort of off camera.
Yes. And the mom, even I think they say they brought her back, but we don't even see her. It's just a body in the thing. So
the mom's, she's face down, ass up next to her son, and he drags her into a hut that explodes.
Yeah. And he gets to come back briefly, and they actually felt really bad. Like, he didn't know until a week before filming that he was going to die immediately. And the directors were like, the directors also pitched writing this to George Lucas, which is what makes it nuts. They tried to pitch a family adventure to George Lucas, and he said, I want Heidi, because of his daughter, and I want it dark. And the only theory I have, and like I've seen this with both Spielberg and Lucas, is like they had both gone through a divorce recently, and like Spielberg with Temple of Doom and George Lucas with this just feel like angry and are taking it out in their films.
I mean, in a way, yeah. I think George, there is that aspect to it, of course, but I think George always wants to be taken seriously, even though he also knows he's doing ridiculous stuff. Now, if you look at the 80s too, and this is something important because yes, Heidi is a big point to that, but we can't ignore the 80s trope of Punky Brewster and Webster and Different Strokes, which is small orphan, older man or older family.
Yeah.
That was like, families were just collecting orphans back in the day. And so you do have this aspect of like, all right, we need to do that. The problem was there was a attitude and actual personality to the children. The children were good. Like, they were funny, and then the older people were the straight man, and that's why it worked so well, right? In this, it's more of like she's a little puppy, and that it doesn't work because there's nothing to, you can pity this child. Like, it's like she's cute and she's pitiable, but there's nothing behind her, which is the problem. They don't give her anything.
But all I'm throwing out there is that this movie starts on a very weird foot because George Lucas wanting a bunch of contrasting things. And then to your point, missing kind of what makes the other parts, right? Is like, okay, well, if you're going for a Heidi, the reason Heidi works is you've got one of the greatest child actresses ever. And
yeah,
I just dropped her name, Shirley Temple. There we go.
There you go.
And, the dynamic is very good. And we're not going to get that here. And part of why we're not going to get that here is also George Lucas wants us to be dark and action oriented. So instead of focusing the movie on this child and grandpa character interaction, which we get a little of, and doesn't make a lot of sense, by the way, instead of that, we get like random Wilford Brimley as an action star, which we needed, Jeff. We needed Wilford Brimley as an action star. We needed this, Jeff. We needed this.
Boy, is it Wilford Brimley as an action star, where it's clearly Wilford Brimley's stunt double as an action star.
Wait, that wasn't, you don't think he did his own stunts, Jeff? You're blowing my mind here.
It's very funny because he has the hermit energy, and what we find out he's actually marooned on the forest moon of Endor. It's important to know, and we didn't say this, and this is my bad. This takes place before Return of the Jedi.
Okay, well, it's also, this gets weird. At one point, this was canon. Officially, it's no longer canon.
C-canon, they call it, yeah.
And even if you put it canon, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Try and just do the 2-minute synopsis, then we can decide how much we want to go in depth.
Okay.
Okay, The Tawani family has been crash landed on Endor. Everybody crash lands on Endor, apparently. They're finally repairing their spaceship. The Ewoks that were befriended in the first episode, the kids had to befriend the Ewoks to save the parents, are all getting ready to go. Except right as they're getting ready to go, a bunch of marauders show up and, for whatever, inexplicably kidnap all the Ewoks, kill all the parents. The reason they're doing this is they want to get the space power, is how they know it, because they're very primitive and know from an old schematic that'll get to the end, the spaceship has basically a car battery, for lack of a better word. So they get that, but Ewok and Sindel get away because they're tiny, which doesn't even make a lot of sense plot-wise, because all the Ewoks are tiny, but let's just go with
There's a raid. He's not as fat as the other Ewoks. They can't get through.
Well, because he is a child. I mean, he is a child in the movie, but that's their argument. Is
one of the funny parts too, and I know you're going through there, and I know we're doing that, but you can clearly see the terrible Ewok costumes made for TV, and then the reused Ewok costumes that look great.
How much, as a Star Wars nerd, just out of curiosity, we'll go off this briefly. How much did you look for reused stuff? Because they do
like Pat Blue gets great coverage on that. Like when you see,
but also like some of the spaceship stuff is like, I believe the crash spaceship, the Tawani family's crash spaceship, I believe is like a snow speeder from Empire.
Oh yeah, of course. But it's funny because some Ewoks look great. Wicket is not that. If you ever see any of the memes of Wicket's eyes looking absolutely terrifying, that's from these. Wicket, yeah, there you go. So you're wearing a Wicket shirt right there. I'm wearing, my closest to that is a Return of the Jedi, Jabba and Leia, but Jabba is actually a pug.
All right, that'd be funny.
Bought for me by Adam Todd Brown. Shout out to Adam.
Very nice.
Now, so like you can see it's a mix of bad and then reusing Return of the Jedi stuff. And so the Ewoks, because there's this raid that they get caught, that Sindel and Wicket get caught, and they just slip right out because they're tiny. Because that's it. They're rated like it's very Dark Crystal, Podlings, and the Skeksis thing. Yeah, energy.
And even from a plot thing, it doesn't make sense, because if they're just there for the spaceship, why would they both wreck the space? Anyway, but too far.
It's fine.
Anyway, they get captured. The Ewoks, all the Ewoks except Sindel and Wicket are out of the picture. They're just basically, they don't kind of know what to do. They find shelter in a cave. There's a dragon in the cave. Wicket makes a hand glider. They get away from the dragon. I'll point 2 points out. This scene was to stretch for time. That's to your point about like,
gee, really?
Yeah, I know, right? Basically, ABC's like, we need this to fit an hour block, right? Because it's made for TV. They get to the end and they're like, oh shit, even with all the stuff that happened in this movie, we do not have a long enough movie. And this is George Lucas. So much of this is George Lucas's coming back and his ideas. He's like, what about a dragon and a hand glider? And they're like, sold. So that's
like, this is the best idea of all time. There's no aspect to it. Now this has real like Land of the Lost stop motion energy to it. And I was trying to look at and I'm doing this now, so I'm trying to like kill for time, but really looking at like, who did they get? Phil Tippett to do this?
I don't know if they got, they might have. I know that they did get a lot of the originals, but I mean, a lot of this just is the budget difference. And some of the stuff I watched about the behind the scenes, they noted that they had made massive improvements to stop motion for instance, Empire and Return of the Jedi. So like, if you look at the Tauntaun, that's stop motion, but they are able to make it look organic because they have more time and money. When they get to the Ewok movies, they can still do stop motion. They still have the technology, but they can't afford it. So to your point, it's kind of frustrating because it's like, we know what you can do. We know what the people with this equipment can do. And they're like, yeah, but we didn't let them do that.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. I would also like to add to that the main piece that comes out of this in continuity is courtesy of Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, because they bring back something from this movie in The Mandalorian. Do you know what?
What is it?
The Blurrgs.
What are Blurrg? Okay, so what's
the mounts? The
thing that
monster looking mounts. That's when he's learning. Remember how he's riding one? Where where Nick Nolte, he's like a Blurrg trainer.
That's awesome.
Blurrgs are in continuity. It's really the only thing about this that is in continuity. Sort of like how they reused, Wilro Hood and the ice cream maker from Cloud City when he's running with the ice cream maker. And they brought those back in with the Mandalorian to be like, well, these are safes. These are portable safes.
Oh, that's awesome. So anyway,
so there's a dragon scene that is just god awful.
It is terrible. And it was added after the fact and directed by George Lucas for what it's worth. All right. So they escape the dragon though. this is a classic 80s trope that's worth noting that like I've seen physics teachers love is whenever you see someone fall in a movie, they're dead, right? Because it's always played for time. When someone's falling in a movie, the dragon grabs Sindel and then drops her, and then Wicket comes down with his hand glider and saves her. She would have died. If you just do like simple math, like the gravity would have killed her. But that's
the barest amount of physics would have made it so Wicket, first off, wouldn't catch the dragon in the hang glider because he catches it so he can drop a rock on it.
Yeah.
He drops the rock on it, and it instinctively drops Sindel because of course it does. And he's like, "Oh shit! Like, what did you think was going to happen there, Wicket?" But anyway,
let's give some fairness. Wicket is a child.
It's fair enough. I think of him as more of a teen than a child, but that's fine. But yeah, and then he like dive bombs to save her, and then they crash. Everybody dies in this except the dragon, but somehow they make it.
All right. So anyway, they randomly run into a super fast mouse named Teak, who is awesome. This is one of those.
Oh, really?
Okay. So Jeff, this is one of those things where you've mentioned you'll have things from your childhood, like a commercial or movie that you just remember and you quote. Mm-hmm. So you and your brother, you said, would do like pea bags and stuff from the Zelda commercials. At one point in this movie, yeah. No. All right. So anyway, at one point in this movie, Teak just goes like that. That is something I quoted my entire life that just has stuck with me from childhood. And like, of course, no one else knows what I'm talking about. So I've shown my wife that scene in the movie to be like, this is where I got it. And she's like, it's hilarious. Anyway.
Yeah, he has the ears of, I forget what the breed of dog is, but they have like the pointy ears with the little hairs that come out. He has like, he's clearly designed after that. This thing sucks so hard.
And you want to know fun behind the scenes? It was originally supposed to be a puppet, or like an actual puppet. And it looked too bad as a puppet. And they found out that the puppet costume was roughly the same size as one of the actresses. So then they transitioned it from a puppet to an Ewok costume, which you already noted. The Ewok costumes made specifically for these movies are far, far inferior to those used in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, this thing looks like a mutated Ewok that has the powers of the Flash.
Which is true, yep.
For some reason, it just can run fast. And its whole point is to be like the mischief aspect. But meanwhile, Wicket was that in Return of the Jedi. So now Wicket's the straight man, and he's not supposed to be. It's also important to note, and there are different theories on this, but Wicket speaks English, or excuse me, Wicket speaks Basic. In that regard, they can communicate with each other.
I know the theory on this.
But the other theory of that is a theory that you see oftentimes in many films, which is it is in English Basic for those that are watching to understand, but in reality that they are most likely speaking the native language of the indigenous people, that would be the Ewoks, so that they're all technically speaking in the Ewok language, but we're seeing it coming out as English because we're the people observing.
Or the humans, or the Tawanis can be from some subset, right? We don't know if they're, they speak Basic proper, like on Coruscant, or from somewhere else. That's the
Ewoks. No, because then
the Ewoks speak Ewok. The Ewoks speak Ewok. The Tawanis, so that's Mace and Sindel, speak a variant of English that is not Basic. And then so when Wicket comes, it would be like if Wicket learned French. Yeah. Because if Wicket learned French and then someone showed up and spoke English, although Wicket would still,
because Wicket doesn't talk. He doesn't understand anything that Leia says when they meet at all. And even if someone was speaking French to you, you might be able to pick out a couple things, a couple similarities. And
Leia as a diplomat would have had other lines. I mean, this is one thing I love about this movie, because it's a common theme on this show, is about nostalgia and people lying to themselves about their childhood and the properties that they love. And that's the key. This came out right after Return of the Jedi. Yeah. This came out as a wide production on ABC. This came out with George Lucas with his hands on all of the dials. Mm-hmm. There is no excuse for any fan that in the future is like, oh my God, Rise of Skywalker ruined continuity, or this doesn't make any sense, or don't they realize that in this movie Obi-Wan had this kind of lightsaber and George Lucas is destroying my childhood because how would R2-D2 not remember that? It's like George Lucas did this less than a year after the ink was dry on Return of the Jedi.
It's also important to know that George Lucas already ruined Star Wars. Like, and as much as we make the joke, like he can't ruin something that's his or whatever, like the prequels already unraveled a lot of the
But
stuff.
I'm not
that
even
we
going for the
grow at.
prequels. I'm going 84 because that's what people are saying. They're like, oh, by the prequels, he was too successful and had too, because Star Wars had grown by that
Yeah.
point, right? It's like, oh, by that point, he couldn't live up to the hype. And I'm like, no, 84, like 80, the year after. I'm like, there is no nostalgic argument. There is no director in the future. It's like Ryan Johnson, however you say it, last Onion was awesome, but there is nothing he could do that is like as bad to the Star Wars canon as the Ewok movies.
Oh, The Last Jedi I love because it's such a middle finger to the worst kind of fans. So I loved every aspect of it.
Okay, and I said Rise of Skywalker incorrectly. That everybody agrees is terrible, but I had fun because I was in the theater. But anyway,
You know what's funny? I've seen Rise of Skywalker once, and I'm like, I'm good. So there's a couple of aspects about this which are clearly like the groundwork for Willow. Like
that's
there's
what has been said in a lot of the comments.
okay, yeah. This is sort of like when PlayStation 2 came out, they released a video game. There was a video game that was released called The Bouncer. And The Bouncer was just them saying, here's what Final Fantasy X is going to look like. Like they showed you a preview kind of like, here's the engine that we're working with. Here's a version of it. Like we can give you this while you're waiting for this project that's taking forever. That is sort of the energy. Now, granted, people weren't waiting for Willow. But when you look at it, it's like Warwick Davis. Do you have a stop motion dragon? Absolutely. Do you have an evil sorceress? Absolutely. Do you have medieval castles in places where they don't even necessarily belong? Absolutely. And that really, oof, boy. Yeah, because there are medieval castles. Important to note that Endor has castles.
Endor has, I mean,
or excuse me, the forest moon of Endor.
And if you watch the Ewok cartoon, their theme song sure as hell wants you to know it's the forest moon of Endor, Jeff.
Yep. Because they're on the forest moon. Ewoks. What a lazy theme song, by the way.
I never saw the show, and I could not, like, that's the thing. When I was doing research for this, I was like, let's take a look. And then, of course, like Wicket's voice, when I was like, nope, I'm out. I ditched that show pretty quick. But I mean, a common point you could make is like Endor between these two movies seems horrendous. And like, how would the Emperor have ever decided to go there? Did they do any research? And what I'll say is that's not even a plot hole, is that big companies making short-sighted decisions. I mean, that would be the argument around the Star Wars thing. So that's when you get kind of the cinema sense, people are like, oh, how did they not know there was a castle on this moon? It's like, yeah, big company just randomly deciding to put a factory in a place that has no place having a factory. That happens in the real world all the time. That's not a plot hole. And it's actually in character with what we've seen of the Empire and the Star Wars universe.
The real answer is the Empire doesn't care. If you're in their way, they're just going to plow you over. I do not expect that castle to have lasted through Return of the Jedi, by the way. I'm gonna assume that it was raised by the Empire.
The Empire probably showed up, thought the Marauders were the threat, took out the Marauders, made their thing, didn't realize the Ewoks were the threat. The Ewoks are laying low because they've been attacked by a giant and Marauders now. And then, of course, when a C-3PO god shows up, they come back.
I will add, by the way, that depending on what canon you subscribe to, the Death Star's explosion would have absolutely destroyed all life on Endor. But beyond that too, they talked about how they created a deflector shield, that the rebellion put a deflector shield up over over the forest moon, and they had like this way to like remove the debris. No, the Ewoks would have been absolutely decimated.
I enjoyed that in the beginning of the Heidi scene where they're dancing through the fields and Sindel's like, I'm gonna leave, but don't worry, I'll come back and visit you. And I'm like, nah, he's dead. I'm like,
she comes back. I would love to see her just come back and be like, oh shit, all of my friends are dead.
They should have done that in the Rise of Skywalker, which was so amazing. Or they should have just had like Sindel's there, like, oh, what are you doing here? They're like, oh, we're here for this, random Death Star thing because the Emperor hit a map to his home planet here. Like, what about you? He's like, oh yeah, I used to have an Ewok friend here when I was fighting like a wizard. She's like, what are you talking about? Anyway,
I'm sorry.
That scene needs to be there. That would have been funny. Okay, so they find an abandoned house because they're like that. The one defense you can give Ewok, Wicket, and Sindel in this movie is like they're kids and they're idiots.
Yeah,
because they come to this fully furnished house that they've been led to by a creature And they're like, nobody's home. Must be empty. We'll just live here.
To be fair, that's something that happened a lot of times when people were traveling in the wilderness. You'd come across an abandoned house. Like that happens a lot.
All right. So
Or happened, excuse me. There were people on the frontier. They would use houses and move on. They would die while they were on the hunt. There are a lot of abandoned houses like that. I accept that. That is, of the things that I'm crossing my arms at and looking at, that is not one of them, because I do recognize that, there's a lot of abandoned domiciles throughout history.
all right. So good to know that like fits in historical
And
canon
realistically,
in
he was probably killed by those monsters. Like if you're really thinking about it, he was probably killed by the group of
the
raiders.
Marauders, the dragons, possibly even the Ewoks. Who knows?
Yeah.
Also, I mean, it's worth noting, we've also learned in these movies, in the first Ewoks movie, there is a pond that you can fall in. And if you don't have a magic stick, you just die. Like you drown, because it's like a mirror pond. Like if you touch it, you end up underneath it and you can't break through unless someone has a magic stick to get you out. That happens in Ewoks Caravan of Courage, but that is a scene in that movie. Yeah. And in this one, there is just a black pond that apparently Wicket, who's
Space
grown up here, is
piranhas,
not
yeah.
aware of, is just like, I don't know, does it have piranha? Is it supposed to be acidic or have piranhas in it? What's the...
Well, it seemed, no, it's not acidic. There's something in there, because a bunch of the marauders get eaten and you can see the bubbles moving towards them. So it's clearly it's not like smart acid. It's clearly there's some kind of serpent, piranha, whatever you want to say, is under that black water.
So there's so many ways to die on the forest moon of Endor. Yeah. That should be in the theme song as well.
So the part you're discussing now is essentially the Heidi part, which is there's an extended part where she is trying to get this guy to warm up after he kicks them out, eats their food.
Well, they show up, they're cooking in his house. He comes home, he gets in. You're noting doing the sketch comedy version of himself.
What are you doing here?
Do you want a funny behind the scenes story? I don't know how true it is, but Eric Walker said this on a podcast. Apparently, Wilford Brimley hated the directors so much he punched one of them.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so he's even more awesome. But Wilford Brimley shows up, sees these kids in his home, and is like, "What are you doing here? Get out!" Yells. Yeah. And then they've made some food that he starts eating with Teak. And apparently at some point, like, they're never going to explain this or discuss it. Like, at some point in his time on the forest moon of Endor, I'm going to keep saying that, Jeff, it's too much fun, Wilford Brimley just befriended a rat with super speed. They never talk about it. It's like very Chewbacca-ish, but doesn't even make sense.
Way bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if Chewbacca was a burden instead of... Chewbacca is a giant, powerful mechanic / pilot. Like, Chewbacca's literally the best friend you could have. And when you look at this thing, you're like, oh, this is the worst. He's just running around like an asshole. Regardless, he takes the food, starts eating it, and he's like, take all the rolls you want, but don't give any to them.
It seemed very obvious where he's telling Teak, go feed the kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, that to your point of like the change of heart, one of the reasons this fails is so much of the movie is spent on marauders and dragons that if you're really going for the Heidi,
Raven Lady.
And Raven, we're going to talk Raven Lady soon. If you're supposed to be doing a family movie, which is supposed to be entirely about the character development between a pernicious young child and an old man with, a cold heart, we don't get any of that. It just all happens immediately. He tells him, go away. And immediately he's like, go feed him. Then he goes out and Wicket's trying to start a fire. And he's like, you could burn down the forest. But it also seems more like he's just using that as an excuse. So he tells Teak to feed the kids. Teak goes and feeds them. Wicket and Sindel start making a fire. Wilford Brimley shows up and says, you can't make a fire out here. It's not safe. You have
trying to burn the whole forest down.
Awesome.
Yeah, here's what I will say. This is not done as badly, I think, as you're implying, in my opinion, because it's not fully, the way that he delivers the lines, it's not fully obvious that he wants him to not give him the food. Like not at the beginning, like clearly we all know that's where it's going. But
by the third time it is. I mean, he does do very much.
Well, sure.
Says it once, repeats it.
But it's softening up and you're like, oh, he doesn't want him to burn down his place. So he just gives them the night and tells them they're going to leave. And then later he builds them a bed and he's like, I made you a bed. Pick which one you want, kind of a thing. Like it's clearly sitcom-y, but that's because it is. But it is more gradual than it seems, but also it moves really fast.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, obviously doing a recap, I'm going super fast and having just watched it and as an adult. But to that point, the whole warming up does not take too much time, which is he lets Teak give them some food. He tells them they can stay the night so that they don't burn down the forest. The next morning, he leaves. He has like a job. We'll discover, and I'll just ruin it now, that he has a spaceship that he is, trying to repair or maybe get a signal out. He's got a downstar star cruiser that is basically just missing a crystal in the middle that powers it. And so during the day, he goes to that, does, we could imagine any number of things because it does have power. So he could be sending out signals. He could be trying to determine anything. He does that during the day, but he leaves Wicket.
He's a scout for the Empire.
That would be an even cooler. That would be a fun end if when they leave, he's like, all right, well, we're heading out. He's like, well, I just got one stop to make before we leave. Spoilers, by the way, they get off the planet in the end. If you just go spoilers, got one more stop to make. I had a contracting job. I got to drop some schematics of this planet to this guy named Palpatine. That would have been cool.
I would also like to add, by the way, that in this he's like, me and my friend, me and my co-pilot, and you're just like, oh, this guy's dead, huh? And then you just assume whatever, and then later they're like, that's the guy right there. There's his bones, and you're like, that didn't seem necessary, but okay.
Well, see, the dialogue's not great. Here's the easy defense of child actors in general is it's really hard to be a good child actor for a variety of reasons. One of them is they're not allowed to work as long. The reason that twins are really popular, like Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, is you get double hours. You can do like one kid scene for 4 hours in the morning and the afternoon. As I mentioned, Sindel, the actress who played her, could not read, so the direction was to have someone tell her the lines ahead of time. So it's like she's not even emoting or thinking. She is repeating what somebody else said. And then additionally, we mentioned television budget as well as limited hours. You're not getting multiple takes. So essentially you're like, did she repeat the lines I just told her?
It's weird they didn't get twins.
I don't know. Again, George Lucas made so many decisions behind this and they're all arbitrary. One of the fun behind the scenes facts is one of the directors got him 3 custom made stamps that said, great, could be better, 86.
Yeah.
And he said George Lucas just loved these because they turn in a script and George Lucas would just stamp them like a child. Yeah. So George Lucas was calling all of the shots. And again, at no point does it seem like anybody had enough sway to just be like, this girl looks like, because he did want someone that looked like Shirley Temple. It's like, this young girl does look like Shirley Temple, and someday she could be a great actress. If you're trying to make a trilogy, which was the original plan, of movies at a 1-a-year pace, that is going to be too much time for her to learn, find a different actress. But George Lucas, who also picked Jake Lloyd, is like, no, that's our guy.
It's funny how much she looks like Drew Barrymore.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Like, especially at that time, because we're looking at, 2 years post E.T., right?
So it's entirely possible he did the same thing. He saw E.T. Like that was a great kid.
So like when we see that though, and yeah, because you see like the kid that they book is faux Mark Hamill for this, and then this kid is and I referred to her as the Kirkland brand Drew Barrymore,
yeah,
but not to her fault because again she's like 4, and you can't expect a good actor to be 4 and that good, except Drew Barrymore was 4 and she was that good.
And then of course like Elliot on ET as well with the that's a famous scene as well when Steven Spielberg is like watching the scene is like all of them there are like, what the fuck is this? Like,
you got the part, kid.
Purple.
The audition he does and Spielberg's just like, you got the part, kid, like you got it. So
Noah goes out the next day to do his work, which we discover later as he's going to a starcraft doing something, whatever. He comes back and thinks that Sindel and I keep wanting to call Wicket Ewok, but Sindel and Wicket have left and is like, who needs them? And then he does tell Teak, he doesn't lie about it. He says, I made them 2 beds in case they stuck around, but since they're leaving, you can have a better bed, Teak. And then they come back in and go, we're going to make a pie. And his heart is melted. It's done. It took 1 day, Jeff.
Yep.
But to be fair, he's like stranded on a moon, on a crazy, dangerous moon that he recognizes. He understands better than Wicket how dangerous this moon is. When he goes out in one of the most hilarious action scenes later, we'll get that in a second. He's like actioning up and he's like clipping carabiners. And you're like,
Was
All right.
clearly a survivalist. Yeah.
And then he knows like to watch out. He'll like tap things with his stick ahead of time. He is well aware of how dangerous. So it makes sense that he would be initially very angry and persnickety. And maybe he's like, oh my God, another human. Thank God.
It wouldn't be hard to see him from a timeline perspective now. You could retcon that character as a pre-clone Republic commando. It makes sense. Being a Republic commando, when the clones came out, you are forcibly retired, right? Like at that point in time, like, you're there. They were forcibly retired because they needed.
So you're not going to do a history podcast, but you'll do a Star Wars history podcast.
I'll do a Star Wars.
This is awesome.
But from the timeline, okay. So think about the timeline, right? So between the Clone Army and the Clone Wars, and when this would have been shot, it's going to be about 20 to 25 years, right? Which would bring him back to be about 20 to 25 years. At his age, he's about 60 in that, maybe even younger. So you're looking at like 35 or something. So sort of, if you're a soldier, that's going to be towards the end of that part of the career, right? But he's clearly not going to be an officer. The clones come in, they make the Clone Wars. This is on Palpatine's move. Palpatine absolutely needs the military to be clones, primarily because of Order 66. When Order 66 comes in, you need to have full obedience. You can't do that with pre-clone commandos. You just can't have full obedience. It's not how it works. We've all seen a Vietnam movie. We know that shit happens, right? So then he would get released, fired, given a discharge, however you'd want to say it. He then has to exist on the fringes of Republic society, or probably had a good retirement, went over here, become stranded, but he would have all that training. Like, he would have survivalist training. He could have been stationed on Kashyyyk.
I absolutely love your backstory for Noah in this. This is amazing.
By the way, I literally just came up with that backstory. Like, that's not something that I was thinking when I went there.
So Jeff's saying that, but to people that are only listening to the audio medium, there is a whiteboard behind Jeff with all sorts of drawings, and writings, and timelines. I mean, he's saying he just came up with it. I'll believe him, but I'm just noting that's in your background.
But as it clicks, that does make sense to me that he could very well have been a former Republic commando pre-clones.
And it gives a lot, because later we're going to see him fight a monster. Now, what ends up happening, we kind of mentioned this, and I actually forgot to bring this up when it happens. There is a sorceress with the Marauders who can turn into a raven because of a magical ring.
And she's like a mercenary for them. Or she's like their... It's hard to explain what she is, because she's treated like she's either been hired by them or enslaved by them.
The backstory, which again, of course, go for the C canon Star Wars backstory, is that she was a dark sister, which is like a force using sect of, witches essentially, that was cast out. She stole the ring, which is a relic of theirs. She wound up with the Marauders while trying to escape. The Marauders crash landed. That doesn't make a lot of sense either, because they seem baffled by how a starship works. Yeah. But whatever. But this is someone, again, what happens with Star Wars so much is George Lucas comes up. He's like, I would really like a planet full of teddy bears. And the writers are like, all right, well, I guess we'll make this
that's
work.
After the fact. Yeah. Because he really said, I want a planet full of Wookiees.
Yeah. And then he went, wait, well, to your point, the belief is George Lucas, knowing money making, went, oh, wait, teddy bears would be a much better toy to sell.
It was just cheaper. Costuming budget.
I could buy it being both. Hey, it's cheaper if we do these as teddy bears. And two, hey, we got teddy bears. That'll sell as toys.
It was literally him just saying it would be too expensive to make them Wookiees. Let's just make them. I mean, that's a famous story in that is it's Ewoks because Wookiees would have been too much of a pain in the ass to do.
And then the belief, right, is they're called Ewoks because that's Wookiee,
yeah.
The E move, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The amount of merchandising opportunities you have there, yeah, it's a lot easier to hug a chubby Ewok than a lanky 7 foot tall Sasquatch.
And then, but to the same point, so we've got, we're saying all this. So the belief is there's this witch that's working with this set of marauders. This marauder is led by Lurch from the Addams family. That is true.
Sure is.
And apparently, like to your point, she's like a second in command. This is a very Darth Vader relationship where she has control of all of them. But if she ticks off the lead guy, she gets in trouble. I believe his name is Turek, something like that.
Tarak, yeah.
Tarak. And he basically tells her she has to go find the child because she's trying to, he's like, this battery is super powerful. The way he knows this is Noah's friend that we just mentioned that went off to the forest and went missing. Their spaceship crashed on the forest moon of Endor. Noah and his friend are there. His friend's like, I'm going to go out and see if I can find anything to help. He never comes back. Noah, I like it as like a space commander's like, he's just dead. Like like when Sindel asked about it, he's like, no, he's dead. He's like, he's dead. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Guy's dead. But he found the Marauders and is like, hey, look, I have a spaceship and it just needs this power. And he gives them like a blueprint of, or a diagram, something of what the spaceship needs to power. And so their belief is, oh, you have the power of the stars. We can get to the stars with this if we get it. Tell us how to make it. And he's like, I can't. I'm asking you for help. And instead of letting him go, they chain him to the wall and let him die. Well, they go search for it themselves. They found it, but the point is, this would be very much if you dropped into medieval times and gave them like a combustion engine without any gasoline in it. They wouldn't be, it's the most powerful and revolutionary thing they've ever seen. They wouldn't be able to do anything. That's what's happening. They've got this witch here who's going, I can't do it yet. I can't make this battery work. I don't understand how it works.
Yeah,
and
okay. I'm a witch. I'm not a mechanic.
Exactly. And so he says, go find the child. So because she can turn into a raven because of this ring she has that we have seen once in the movie, she flies and eventually does find I'm assuming because like the smoke, right? Does she see the smoke coming out of the cabin and is able to track down the cabin? Instead of for whatever reason going back to the Marauders and saying they're here, come get them, she uses her powers of illusion to appear as a like princess looking woman on a white horse singing a song that she heard Sindel singing. So like Noah is again warms up in one day, tells them that his friend is dead and is like, well, your parents might be dead, but they'll live on in your heart. Is there anything you remember? And Sindel's like, yeah, she used to sing this song.
And she sings the song.
Oh, Jeff, you can tell, loved the song. It's amazing.
Beautiful. I'm like, don't lie to her, Wilford Brimley. She did terrible. Do not fill her. She can do things well, but don't say she's a good singer because she's not. And then she's going to end up getting embarrassed on Endor Idol by some prick Ewok in a black t-shirt being like, that was absolutely dreadful. Nub. Don't fill her with lies. That's going to be a night chihuahua from me, dog.
So anyway, she sings this song that the sorceress hears, and she uses that.
It's just like an Arthurian. She's like an Arthurian princess or fairy or something.
Yeah, who even knows? I mean, I didn't bring this up in the original notes when I watched the first movie. I noted just how many normal animals are on Endor. The first movie starts with a goat biting the rope to Deja's hang glider.
Yeah.
And then when they go back, they have horses. And then for whatever reason, when they're playing with Sindel, they have a ferret. And this sorceress turns into a raven. Like Endor just has a lot of, and then at one point,
so does Dagobah. Dagobah has snakes and Gila monsters and shit. Yeah, it just happens.
So I'm just it's all the same. And then Sindel even calls it a horse, so is what it is. But anyway, so Sindel the next day just hears this melodic singing, which is the song she sang the night before. The sorceress uses to trap her, reveals she's the sorceress, and takes her back to the Marauders. And then Wicket realizes she's
and by the way, rides away on a horse that clearly just has a little doll draped over the side of it. It's so funny.
Jeff is not going to let the special, like, I think as soon as I told you this won an award, you were like, I'm not going to let any bad special effect go in this movie.
It's fine. It's not, but it's fine. I can't get mad at something that's almost 40 years old, but God, this thing's
and yet we if you did not, we are seeing a very easy case study. If you're someone like me that grew up with this, my brother told his girlfriend to buy me an Ewok shirt, which I am wearing, a Wicket shirt for this show. This bobblehead is a gift from my brother. When I was younger, I, really liked this, and my brother and I would quote it back and forth to each other. If you grew up with this, you have a fondness for it. If you're seeing it for the first time, you're like, what the hell is this? Rightfully so.
Yeah, so anyway, it's bad. And I'm not anti-Ewok, but I'm anti this movie. And I'm not anti-Ewok. I'm anti this writing, this directing. And again, it's made for TV special effects, and I get that. And again, we got, stop motion, and it is what it is. It's fine. Sure, it might have been great at that time. Okay. I'm just mad that George Lucas is so known for special effects that he allowed his name to be on something that doesn't look good.
Yeah, but I mean, this is also like we this is a running theme. This was very much like the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. We're like, when you have something on a deadline that just needs to get out, and you're not caring, this you get stuff like this, which is why when we see stuff like Muppet Family Christmas, it's so amazing because it's like, oh, these people cared about the craft and put in the time to do it right. And these other people's like, fuck it, throwing a stop motion dragon randomly here because we're short 10 minutes, as opposed to have Wilford Brimley say another line or something.
Yeah.
They get back to, as you mentioned, the medieval castle, which the Marauders are at. And Tarok is trying to get Sindel to tell him how it works. And of course, like any of us, it would be like if someone showed you a car battery and is like, Jeff, show me the magic. And you're like, it's a car battery, dude. Like, put it in a car. The car goes.
What?
Like, what are you looking for? So she is responding correctly. And then Tarok gets so angry, he now throws both Sindel and the sorceress in prison because he can't get the power.
He takes a ring.
Yep, and takes the ring because he is a smart leader for the most part.
Yeah, he's kind of the prototype of Saris from Galaxy Quest from a visual and leadership perspective.
Really?
I would add that this actor who was Lurch, his name's Carol Stryken, I believe, still alive, which is very rare because he's almost 70.
Oh, you're just talking height wise because he is a giant, right?
Yeah, he's huge. He's not small because he was born in 1948.
And then he also, most famously was in Twin Peaks. Just the,
I'd say he was most famously in Addams Family, but that's fine.
You think Addams? Well,
yes,
yeah, probably
yes.
wider reach.
He's also in Men in Black. But yeah, no, Addams Family is what he's known for. That's his big thing.
All right, I'll give it.
He's still making stuff, by the way. He was in something in
there is a broad range of the actors in this movie with where their careers ended up. So,
yeah,
like Tony Cox. Would you say biggest Bad Santa? Like, am I right on that?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say Bad Santa, and he was also so funny in Me, Myself, and Irene.
Yeah, so he's in that. He's great. There's a variety. Yeah, some actors. Obviously Warwick Davis is still around. Like. Some of them, this was it. Child actors. It's a rough.
This
industry.
dude. I will add that this dude has maintained a lateral career his entire time. They're just like, let's put this giant in some shit and have him walk around, grunt, and occasionally say a line.
So Wicket goes back and basically notes that, hey, Sindel's gone. We got to go save her. And Noah's like, let's do it. I missed a scene, Jeff. I apologize. So there is a scene.
Didn't miss a scene in this.
There is a scene where Noah does explain they follow him to the spaceship, so he's aware that they have it. He catches Wicket with a trap, so we're aware that the spaceship is booby trapped, which does come into a play later. They go, how did you get here? He explains it. Then they go home the next night. His heart's warmed. Then Sindel gets captured. Then they're going to go back. We're nearing the end of this, Jeff. I promise.
And when he finds out that she's captured, he has the best commando style Rambo lacing up scene. But all it really is like a fishing vest that he got, like it's literally, it's got like those like
little
clasps,
straps,
the little like plastic clasps, the ones that like you have the male end and the female end and you click it in. And when he did that, I just started laughing because I understand that, there is the joke that like the picture of, Daisy Ridley holding a lightsaber and it says, and a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, they used Phillips head screws. LOL. And it's like, well, sure. Like technology would develop in certain areas the same. Like that would happen. So sure. Clasps, fasteners. This specific version of a clasp is such a like backpack ass clasp that I started laughing my ass off when he did it. And it's like he's trying to they're trying to make it intimidating that he's gearing up, but all he does is he just puts one blaster in a holster and then the rest is all just really hilarious things.
And of course he's got his walking stick, Jeff.
He sure does.
Stick is important. It's going to come up. All right. So there's a lot written on the next couple of scenes. I'm not going to go too much into it, but basically Wilford Brimley with Teak and Wicket goes to this castle. They know to go together. He makes sure to tell him to be careful. They sneak into the castle. This pained me so much, Jeff. This was totally the Manchines from the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. It was the exact same stupid thing. A bunch of giant scary monsters. Oh my God. It was terrible. Because basically you have these super stupid, cute little small things that are imprisoned by this giant monster that have just gotten freed. They're like, we're here to help. And you're like, I hate this. But there is and here's an interesting point, is that this scene could have played if that's what George Lucas had wanted to go for. But to your point, he already did it in Return of the Jedi. So if this movie plays and goes, oh my God, these teddy bears have been captured for a better reason. There is no reason that they were captured. It doesn't make sense that they weren't all just destroyed by the Marauders, because the Marauders' motivation was, we want this spaceship thing. And as soon as they have that, they don't need the Ewoks. They are aware that the Ewoks live on the planet. So it doesn't make sense for them to get captured beyond George Lucas's daughter saying, you can't kill them. If they break out and are suddenly like super savvy and you're like, oh, wow, where did this come from? Except we saw them do that to the Empire, the previous movie. So we're like, yeah, of course they can use all the same tricks they used to destroy the stormtroopers. We literally know they can do that. And in fact, yeah.
Also, no one would have cared if they did that. Like if like mirroring the exact same thing they did in Return of the Jedi, nobody would have a problem with that.
Well, I mean, they do. That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying
exactly. I mean, like thinking about it from a script writing perspective, like, oh, should we do this? Should we repeat this? It's like, yes, we should absolutely repeat this.
Well, we should repeat it if you're like, when you're talking about special effects, that's the irony, is that had they done a smaller scale film, a real Heidi, and the end of the Heidi could literally be like, maybe her parents get captured again. You just make it a running theme that Sindel's parents are freaking idiots and keep getting captured on Endor. And she runs into Wilford Brimley and they have a relationship, and they're able to reuse a lot of the sets that they use, the interiors for spaceships. It could look really good and still have the Heidi vibe and do it. But it's when you're trying to do, for a $7 million budget, a TV movie with this like giant fight between Ewoks and Marauders, that it just looks terrible. So the Ewoks escape.
Because it's Halloween costumes versus Halloween costumes, by the way. That's the other thing, too, is they're all in very difficult costumes to be clear about action with. Like, all these costumes are not very good. Whereas the Stormtrooper costumes or like the actual Imperials, you have a person fighting somebody in a more bulky, difficult costume. It's a lot easier to control the flow of stunts when it's not two people in cumbersome costumes smashing into each other.
But the Ewoks get away. Turok sends the sorceress after that, like says, find them, steals her ring so she can't transform back. The Marauders are going to go track them down. They run to Noah's spaceship because it still has like blasters and stuff on. Really does fit with your theme of he's a former commando. Repeat of the Return of the Jedi scene where they basically fight and win, except it ends in the best way ever, Jeff. So eventually, I love this scene. So it's not a good scene, but
one of the most what the hell scenes that I've ever, like, there's nothing is established that would lead you to think that this is even a possibility.
So let's lay the groundwork. The Ewoks are the Ewoks, with the help of super advanced technology blasters, are turning the tides against the Marauders. The Marauders.
These guys are getting blasted by starship blasters.
Yeah, so it makes sense. Turok, the leader, is upset, and he just finds Sindel and grabs her and like yells to Noah. He's like, "Get your ass out here! I'm going to kill you, or kill her." And Noah, of course, heart's been warmed, comes out. Noah pulls out the crystal to the starship and is like, "Tell you what, I'll fight you for it."
Yeah, and he says, "You kill her, you ain't getting shit.
But if you fight me for it, you can get this.
You can beat me for it." Yeah.
Which is absurd because you have a 7-foot marauder with a broadsword, and Noah, a 6, Wilford.
You can easily describe him as a Wilford Brimley.
Okay, so Wilford Brimley threatens to fight, and he's spry, but he's getting his ass kicked, like rightfully so, because you have a giant with a broadsword against a guy with a walking stick, and they don't Indiana Jones it. He doesn't pull out his blaster and shoot him. That would have made a lot of sense too.
Yeah, or there's no like old man Aikido. Like the easiest way to make an old man seem very like old that's why when Yoda became a flippy lightsaber parkour champion, you're just like, no, Like instead of doing like just this kind of Aikido using somebody
you
else's
do Pat
aggression
Morita and
against
Karate Kid.
themselves. Yeah.
He dodges and makes very
Okay, it's a Mr. Miyagi thing where it's just like, go ahead, throw the punch. Oh, yeah, you just punched through
and
a
what he could
fucking
have
tree
easily
or
done
something.
is maybe get the guy's sword stuck in a tree or something. Now, I know you're going to hate this, Jeff, but I'm going to consider this a good plan and payoff. So what happens is, in one of the best lines, because as we've established, the actress who plays Sindel is amazing.
Very weighted, a lot of the word best holding a lot of weight in one of the best lines of this movie. Yeah.
All right. So Wilford Brimley, Noah's getting his ass kicked. Sindel turns to Wicket, the child, the two children. She goes, Wicket, do something. They had to ADR that, by the way, because that's how great the line is.
Mm-hmm.
At the very start of the movie, when they're hanging out together, she's saying she's going to have to go home and go back to school. And Wicket says, stay here, I'll teach you. And he has a sling and he puts a little berry in it. He throws it in the air and catches it. So Wicket's like, I'll teach you proficiency with a sling, which he establishes.
Mm-hmm.
She says, Wicket, do something. He pulls out his sling and he throws a sling. Turok has grabbed the magic ring we established from the sorceress and has it hanging around his neck. He hits that, and for whatever reason, the rule apparently is this magic ring that turns you into a raven, if it is hit by a rock, lights on fire, and transforms you into stone. And Turok sees this happening. He grabs it with his hand and holds it out in like a con, like William Shatner con, fist in the air.
He sure does.
And slowly turns into stone. The sorceress, as a raven, tries to come and peck it out of his hand, and she can't because it's stone, and she flies off. No notes.
I have notes. In no way is any of this result established at all. This is just something where they forgot to write an ending, and then they were like, just fucking make the ring turn him into stone. And you're just like, yeah? You're like, just do it. Just do it. Just magic is real. It's fine. Magic is real. This is it's so infuriating. Like it's from a person whose job it is to understand, interpret, and criticize media in whatever way I do it is a professional capacity. It's my job. It's what I do. To see this, I was like, what? Like, what are you what's happening here? Like, what? Why? That was never established. Not once was that established at all. And it is, in a way, just utterly infuriating.
And they're all like, yeah, makes sense. Back to business as normal.
Yeah. I would like to add that the little fucking freak Teak gives during the battle, he gives a Blurrg a hot foot. Like he's in it, like he's in an MLB dugout, and the Blurrg is like a rookie. Like it was so funny to see it, where I was just like, you gotta be kidding me right now. A hot foot?
I mean, this battle was amazing. Yeah. So I'd forgotten that, but you are right. Yeah, he goes and and by the way, it's worth stressing, right? The hot foot thing, as I understand it, and like this showed, I think Mr. Baseball is the movie I can remember it the most from, because it was a character developing thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
they do
Tom
that.
Selleck does it early in the thing and pisses off the Japanese dugout, and then later they do it to him, showing that they've learned to rib each other because he teaches them how to have fun. He does that with a lighter. Teak does it with flint. So there is this giant monster sitting there, and they make you wait for it. So like Teak goes by his foot and is like sitting there like starting a fire with flint.
Mm-hmm.
And we watch it. We get to see
we
it.
Sure do. We watch the whole process, and then it freaks out and eats some or tramples some aliens.
And then that's how
I'm not sure.
That's how those Blurrg got free and wound up on the Mandalorian. That's their backstory, Jeff.
So yeah, the Blurrg are what essentially amount to, they look like if you've ever seen a wolffish, or I think they also go by a wolf eel. You can call them either or. But they're essentially the dewback version of, it's kind of what George wanted to do with dewbacks in the original, but never could. So you just see one stationary dewback in the back of the Dune Sea. And so you now see that these are essentially pack animals, much in the way like a horse would be, that they can be used for transportation, they can be used for travel, but they also definitely seem carnivorous. They have a carnivore's teeth, which is it would be like using a bear as a pack animal. And you'd be like, what?
Love it.
Why would I do this?
Because you can
I'm
ride
not
a bear.
I mean, I guess, yeah, but like, so I don't really know what kind of aliens these are. I'm not sure if they explain what they are, what Terak is.
He is a marauder. They do have a name. It starts with like an S that does show up on the thing. Uh, Fanny Acid, I guess. Sure.
Okay.
Um,
Do they
and
reuse that race?
I don't. I mean, obvious. What happened with a lot of, like I said, our childhood is these bad things show up in one-off ideas that George Lucas has, and then some people that write, like the extended universe stuff, write about it. I don't think they show up in any other movies, as far as I know, though.
Well, but like the Blurrg, for example, the Blurrg show back up in The Mandalorian. George was not afraid of reusing costumes, and there's so much deep fiction written in the Star Wars universe that
I think it had to have been comics, right? Because they do explain their backstory, and their backstory doesn't make sense. So maybe Dark Horse.
Yeah,
Sure.
it could be, or novels. Like, that's the other thing too. Like, there's also novels
They
that
apparently show up in Star Wars Galaxy and Empire Divided in 2003, according to Wikipedia.
Okay, so there we go.
So Jeff, because you loved this so much, you can now track down more
I
Ewoks
really
Battle
can.
for Endor backstory.
Boy, can't I. And also,
right.
it's very important to know that when you're looking stuff up, the difference between the Battle of Endor and the Battle for Endor.
Fun story, when I was writing the script the first time and was just copying in some of the links, I did copy in Battle for Endor which is the Battle of Endor the first time. And was like, wait a minute, this doesn't have no one in it at all. This is terrible. That is, I think I forgot, with the wrap up, Sindel leaves with no one. They say goodbye to the Ewoks. The end, we'll see you again someday, except they're all going to die when the planet blows up because of the Death Star.
Yep. I mean, although they retconned that, no, that's not what happened, but realistically, that's what would have happened. So when we talk about the lasting implications of the Battle for Endor, that's something that we should address. And by that, I mean, like, for example, you have the Blurrg being used in The Mandalorian. Okay. That's one of those things that is clearly a nod to Star Wars fans.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like in Solo, when she says that she studied Terrascasi, which is the name of the terrible Star Wars fighting game on the PlayStation 1. When you look at that, and the continuity is just all over the place. And yeah, they wrench it. At one point in time, there's a book called, I think, Legacy of the Force Fury, which was written in 2007, I want to say, or that's when it was published. And they actually, there's a scene where someone's watching this movie, so that it's an entertainment. It's referred to as, quote, an entertainment broadcast in which Ewoks spoke basic and befriended shipwrecked little girls.
So it was like, this was supposed to be like a hollow bit or something in the universe. And that's their explanation for how to. So this is very much, I'm trying to think, this has been done before. Like
an in continuity movie.
This is what Buzz Lightyear kind of claims. The Buzz Lightyear movie claims that Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story movies is not our Buzz Lightyear. He's based off of a movie.
It's a toy based off of the movie. Yeah.
So this is the precursor to Buzz Lightyear. Same idea. We are watching
conceptually. That's one way to go back. That's one way to go back to it. It's good to see the Blurrg come back, or in The Mandalorian, because there was like, when you have that fan service, like the Terrascasi reference in Solo, or the Blurrg come back, what you're going to do is you're going to get a lot of people tweeting the Rick Dalton, Leo DiCaprio pointing at the TV screen. People are when a Blurrg shows up on The Mandalorian and it's the guy pointing, it's one of those things where people really do enjoy that. There's not a lot of continuity in this. There really isn't, in spite of the fact that this is just a steaming pile of space shit that, there are people that love it, like you, that might have been watching The Mandalorian and be like, I know that thing. I've seen that thing before. What is that walking piranha? And then you go back and be like, oh my God, they watched the Battle for Endor. Like, that's The Mandalorian is this version of like kind of like desperate fan service, and it's good. They do a good job of it, but it's clearly they do a lot of like wink winks.
Well, we keep sticking with the point of when you look at the Mandalorian and you want to insult any parts of it, this continuity doesn't make sense, or is that really how you're going to explain what happened with Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett? Which I also done. Wasn't amazing, but but the reason I could watch the Book of Boba Fett and go like, this is fun, is I'm like, I like these characters. The
I
special
thought the
effects
Book of
good.
Boba Fett was fun.
I'm old and boring, so yes. It's
Touché.
fun. I mean, but that's the point. Like, we grew up on this. Like,
Yeah.
if you're a Star, like, that is what bugs me so much about like the people our age that claim to be Star Wars fan. And like, they're destroying my childhood. I'm like, you don't remember your childhood. You were lying. I'm like, I was a huge Star Wars fan in the 90s, the customizable card game, which we've hinted at, which will come up in a future show. I guarantee it. We grew up on like books and cheaply produced behind the scene,
You had to
special effects.
treasure hunt for your entertainment sometimes. Like you had to really look for the stuff that you were going to enjoy. Yeah.
And so when people nowadays are like, oh my God, it was the most amazing thing ever, and they've ruined it, I'm like, if you compare The Mandalorian side by side to this, it's not even close. It's, it's so much better. And the stuff you're going to complain about being campy or cheesy or lame or silly looking, I'm like, I'm sorry. There were horrible looking teddy bears fighting stop motion dragons a year after Return of the Jedi.
With
You have no legs to
impossible
stand on.
bones, by the way. I don't know if you noticed the bones that Wicket fights the dragon with, but they are pencil thin, and then they come out to like a big end, and it's just like no animal could survive on those bones.
Well, it's like the argument, like why you can't have super giant bugs, right? Eventually, like the physics, but maybe the midichlorians, Jeff, are in the air. You briefly mentioned Final Fantasy X, and that's one of my favorite games, and I've nerded out on that way too much, and I have behind the scenes stuff on how to win the blitzball game better than anybody out there. I guarantee it.
My brother was a champion blitzball player. That's all he did on that game was play blitzball.
Did he write a script to have them play on the boat to earn a lot of money, and then take the first game to overtime repeatedly, so you could be level 99 in the first match and score 23 goals?
I do not remember that, but I do remember that was the thing that my brother was like. It's like when you met Chocobo breeders or Chocobo breeders in Final Fantasy VII. That's like they spent all their time breeding Chocobos.
Well, see, that's a mistake too, because the random number generator in Final Fantasy VII is skewed, so you just have to do hard resets of the game to get what you need.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe that'll come up on a future show. The key about Final Fantasy X is in that game there are these things called fireflies, and when you start looking through all the lore of the game, that's everything. How are they able to breathe underwater for so long? Fireflies. How are these things able to do that? Fireflies. How is this thing able to, fly? Fireflies. So it's very similar. Like you can use like the midichlorian argument in Star Wars to say when they're like, wait a minute, these bones don't work physically. Wait, this could never happen. It's like, nope, it's midichlorians.
Yeah.
All midichlorians, Jeff.
When we look at like, is the movie a bad idea? No. Is the movie executed poorly? 99.9999%. It is bad. The script is bad. The acting is bad. The special effects are, I guess, good for their time. But when you look at other things that came out around that time, and when you look at previous Star Wars properties, that's the one thing to me where it's like, it's TV. It's like, it shouldn't matter if you are George Lucas. Like, you should want the shit you make to look good. And if you can't, make it a cartoon. Animation
or make
is
it smaller scale. I mean, if it takes place inside of, as I mentioned, you could do when the scenes inside of the spaceship, which are boring and just narrative building, when those happen, it looks good because they have all of the old props from old ships that they can piece together. They can, the people that work on Industrial Light and Magic and with Lucasfilms at the time could piece together a good looking interior Star Wars set, in less than a day. I bet that's what you do.
Yeah, and so apparently, George said that these movies were very expensive, which is, I don't see how, but okay.
But it's what you choose to spend your money on. If you've got a bunch of people, you've got a bunch of 7-footers in Halloween costumes doing really hard to do stunts that don't look good for 7-footers in Halloween costumes. That's what you're spending your money on.
And you're not working on a soundstage. Like, maybe some of the scenes in like the hut might have been on a soundstage, but for the most part, this is clearly not sound staged. It's clearly shot on location. Teak is awful. Teak, he's making Ewoks for because like when you look at like what the Ewoks were, it is something marketable for Return of the Jedi, something for kids. By adding it's like putting a hat on a hat. The Teak character is a redundancy. It is a way to create a superpowered Deus Ex Machina character kind of a thing. Like, oh, well, Ewoks don't have superpowers, but we would benefit from something that has a literal superpower. That is, I think Teak might be the most insulting part of this from an art perspective, from a viewing films as art. Teak is insulting. Is that over? I mean, I'm supposed to be critical about this, right? I'm supposed to look into this and geek out and nerd out, but that is an insulting character.
I love the crown jewel of this trilogy that we're wrapping up, Jeff, being the Muppet Family Christmas, because it is really, really important to show a good example of what we're talking about, because it makes complete sense. These movies were done by ABC to make money. And George Lucas had a very tight script and all this stuff, and it makes complete sense to give it all the flack in the world. You're working with kids, you're on a tight budget, you're on a tight deadline, and you go, okay, well, if you're gonna do that, you have to lean into those constraints and do with what you can. And as we know, with like Muppet Family Christmas, that's where you make these funny little interactions that make more sense, and that's what you invest your time in. And if you have to have plot building things, that's where you make them. You accept that they're narratively needed and might be a little thing, but then you move on from them quickly. And so I do think that's very important, is because it is really, really easy to point at stuff from our childhood as being bad and justify why it's bad. But you also have to say, if that was their goal, what could they have done? And I would agree with that. And I think that's what you're looking at, is like, this was a sequel to a phenomenal made for TV movie. And there was so much they could have done. And George Lucas made a vanity project for his daughter that also was like, it's such a contradiction, because it's a vanity project for a 5-year-old that is also supposed to be dark because George Lucas wants to be taken seriously as an artist. And that makes absolutely no sense.
I'm sorry, but you can't.
You can't do both.
It's so hard to do that. You like standing out being like, I demand to be taken seriously as an artist while I make my action figure made for TV movie featuring a child because I want to do Heidi. But that's bad. Like, it's silly, and you know what? It's fine. Just don't watch it. Like,
if you grew up with this and want to rewatch it for fun, great. If we brought a smile to your heart, great. If not, though, I mean, we're honing in on the amount of time the movie took for this episode, depending on how much I edit it. This is fine. The stuff you were doing, you explaining like Noah's backstory and other funny stuff, Jeff, listen to that instead. Produce that at least.
I would like to see, though, I feel bad for Noah, for the Wilford Brimley character, that he never got an action figure.
There's not a Noah action figure?
I do not believe so. Did Star Wars, because I remember Star Wars Insider, or was it Star Wars? Yeah, Star Wars Insider was the magazine, right? Not Star Wars Galaxy. Star Wars Galaxy was the trading card set. Was there ever a Noah action figure? And I don't think there was. Which, all right,
a bummer.
Because I think that would be a great little like direct, or available only at the Disney store, in spite of the fact that it's not canon. Like, it would be funny if they made that toy, and I bet it would sell
a little.
Or like a 2-pack of like him, or a pack of him, Sindel, and Teak.
I've shouted out Eric Walker, who played Mace in the first movie and briefly in this, and he's got him and Warwick Davis as a class assignment while making this movie, recorded like 2 hours of footage. Mm-hmm. And he's tried to pitch that to Disney repeatedly. He reminds me a lot of you, Jeff. He's got like unboxing videos and stuff, but he like kickstarted a book, does do some stuff, has offered his footage to Disney. And it seems like this is one of those things that they're not interested in doing anything more beyond releasing it on Disney Plus.
Fair.
Which took
I feel like they're probably like, they should be better at it, but they should be nicer.
It is frustrating. I mean, the modern era of streaming where you have these big companies like HBO Max that are looking for tax breaks, and it's like it would be trivial for HBO with their IP to release so much stuff to fans. You could even charge for it. And their logic is it's not even worth the bandwidth it would cost to host that. We would rather do it as a write-off, have some accountant give it some fake value and write it off for our taxes, which is real depressing. So in the modern world, we have all this, we actually have an example of some great footage from the 80s of like Skywalker Ranch and stuff that would be great to see. And unfortunately, the giant conglomeration that pretty much owns the rights to produce that is not interested. Which
It is funny that his character's name is Mace, because as I don't know if you know this, but Mace was the original name used for the first Star Wars.
Really? I did not know. I mean, I was thinking Mace Windu, who also died unceremoniously, but really? So
Yeah,
Star Walker-
originally it was
Luke-
like Luke Starkiller, and it was like the Mace Windu was originally like a name that was going to be used in the original Star Wars thing. Yeah,
Fantastic. All right, Jeff. I know I've taken us a little past time.
I'm here for it, baby. Anytime I can talk Ewoks, I'm happy.
Well, Star Wars definitely. You did the Star Wars history. Ewoks, you're like, what is this? But I was going to definitely say, taking the time, it wouldn't be shocked if you have 20 more podcasts to record. So, all right. What about you, Jeff? How many billion things you got?
Well, hey, if you're listening to this, then I have a channel, whether it's on Patreon or whether you're listening for free. So you can listen to Jeff Has Cool Friends, a real passion project where I get to uplift and focus them. Instead of the attention on me, the attention gets to go to the people that I know, love, and want to sort of share out there. So definitely check that out. You can get early access to uncensored episodes with bonus content at patreon.com/JeffMay. With the Zeb Wells episode that dropped, I think the bonus content is nearly a half hour, and it is incredibly fun. That episode alone is one of the episodes that not only I've been wanting to do for the longest, like since I started the show, but it's one of the most fun and funny shows. And that dude's been writing everything. So check that out. You can also get access to Nerd here. You're listening. You don't need me to tell you that, but on Patreon, also Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl and so much other stuff. You can also hear Tom and Jeff Watch Batman on the Gamefully Unemployed Network, and You Don't Even Like Sports and Unpopular Opinion, both on the Unpops Network. If you want to see me live and in person, by all means, head on over to Blast from the Past on Magnolia in Burbank the second Friday of every month for Mint on Card. And if you live in Massachusetts, February 22nd, knock it off your calendars. Maybe clear off that Wednesday night.
All right, sounds good. And you're what? Hey there, Jeff Furrow on
social
Twitter
media.
and Instagram.
HEYTHEREJEFFRO on Twitter, Instagram, and Hive. We still doing Hive? Sure. Why not?
I don't know. I mean, I have not been paying attention to Hive, and yeah, I sourced out my name on a couple of them. Everything but Mastodon, because Mastodon, I'm a computer programmer. And I go to Mastodon, and I'm like, I don't get it.
There's a lot going on there. Hey, you got anything else to promote?
All right. Well, I do the Box Score Geek show with Brian Foster every other Tuesday. You can find that at boxscoregeeks.com and anywhere podcasts are found as the Box Score Geek show. We're going to have to be talking a lot of Celtics this year, Jeff. They're doing really good. I think they're going to beat the Nuggets in the finals. It'd be cool. As well as on alternating Tuesdays, possibly coming on Wednesdays, I play on twitch.tv/RixterGT with my friend Landon, RIXTERGT. Alternating Tuesdays, I play with my friend Landon, RixterGT on twitch.tv. Currently, we have like an audience of 3. So if you want to join out, that's fun.
Check it out.
Playing Super Metroid. And then, of course, we do the monthly nerd podcast with Jeff. So there's that. And I did the royal we, I guess, Jeff. Yeah.
But that being said, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this, our January 2023 episode of Nerd. Finishing off season 2 of made-for-TV specials and movies. We'll see what's coming up soon. But for now, we love you. Bye.
Bye. All right. Next episode of Nerd is going to be up to you, the fans, to decide. We're going to do a one-off episode while we wait for a great season 3 that I'm really, really excited about. Our choices for next month's show are going to be either a one-off episode about Ben Edlund's original run of The Tick. This is the 11-issue arc in the black and white comics produced by New England Comics, or LCD gaming devices. We're talking about these little things you can buy at the store that just have little pixels, and this even goes all the way back to Nintendo Game & Watch devices. You can hear the discussion Jeff and I have about it, where we even tease what's going to come up next and maybe even tease a season 4 or season 5 if all goes well. Anyway, make your decision, choose wisely. We'll see you next time. The plan for the future is that we have a trilogy plan for season 3. We are hoping to coincide that with essentially year 3 of the Jeff Has Cool Friends brand, which would be really cool. I'm hoping to help some with that and coincide. Yeah, basically, synergistic, very George Lucas, where the Nerd Podcast will have a theme that relates to other stuff that's coming out. We teased it already. Go back and listen to the show if you didn't hear it. But I want to wait a month to do that so that we have a bit of lead time for you to also do some other stuff. You've mentioned you might restructure some Jeff Has Cool Friends Patreon tiers, which your guests have been telling you to do for 2 years. So I'm happy if that happens. It's going to happen at the 2-year anniversary. So we're looking for a filler episode, a Dragon Ball Z episode, the next episode of Nerd. And I haven't minded before where basically we both bring an idea to the table. I have one. If you don't have one, I forgot to tell you before the show. So either we can both bring. Yeah, I think we did it at the wind down of one of the last one, which was like a month ago, right before you and I both had the most hectic Decembers ever. So it's very useful. I was like, hey, Jeff, remember that throwaway line I had at that conversation before I drove through a blizzard and you released every podcast in the world in December? You're like, shockingly, no.
And an 8-episode week.
That was amazing. That was an amazing week.
Go
listen to all of those are worth it. And I still give the shout out to Do You Hear What We Hear? I hope that's a recurring theme. I hope it would be really interesting. I don't know if you can do it again, but I mean, you could do something like that with guests next.
Oh, with that when he did Alex Simonovsky, great episode, really fun. Yeah, he's like, I just wanted to do a one-off.
But I'm saying that is a fast, and if he gives his blessing or whatever next year, depending on the size of Jeff Has Cool Friends at Christmas time, that would be an interesting thing to see some of your guests discuss, like favorite Christmas songs.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like countdown stuff is not owned by anybody. The name is his. That's his name of his podcast. So he gets to choose whatever he wants to do with that.
All right.
But yeah,
anyway,
what was your suggestion for your
my suggestion? And I think I kind of pitched this possibly as a trilogy. And then you said, hey, it would be a good one-off, is going over the original run of The Tick. So the original black and white comic. I actually brought my trade paperback home. So just those, I think there are 11 or 12 episodes that ended right before he then went into animation. I think that would be a fun thing to just recap. I know we're both huge Tick fans on Tom and Jeff Watch Batman. You routinely bring it up as a better show. And in fact, I think you referenced it. This last Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, great show if you don't listen to on the Gamefully Unemployed Network. I think you were referencing something like that. You brought up an episode where there was like an Arthur clone.
Yeah, the Thrakazog episode. Yeah.
And that was the Tick television show. That would be too much. That would be too long to do. That would take a longer season, have to be more regular. But just the comics would be an interesting one, I think. And then if you have a better one-off, we can either battle them out here briefly, put them to a poll, or just go with The Tick.
You don't have to pull teeth on a one-off for me with The Tick. I mean, because there are doing The Tick comics and everything like that, it would be hard for me not to, because that'll be a long episode, and I'll tell you why, is because of the amount that I will want to talk about other Tick things. I'm just not sure that people are going to want 3 months straight of Tick comics, then Tick cartoon, then Tick live action.
If we do get to the point, and part of this is your time frame and my time frame and logistics, where it could be more regularly scheduled, because I'm aware with the month gap in between, it's nice to have a little bit of spice of life variety. I would love to do more Tick stuff if we'll see what your Patreon goes for in the future. If logistically people are like, I want to hear Jeff talk about the Tick more. But I mean, that to your point, the one-off comic, the trade paperback of the original run of The Tick, which was a black and white comic, very much in the Ninja Turtles variety, right? In indie underground. I think from your area, he's from New England, right?
New England Comics, Ben Edlund. Ben Edlund did that off of out of New England Comics, which is, and I believe, I'm not even going to pretend to what city that was in, but yeah, I have that. I've met Ben. I bought the Karma Tornado was actually my first Tick comic that I bought, and I bought the trade paperback from him, and he did a sketch of the Tick inside of it.
We're gonna have to do show and tell for sure on that.
So I do like that. So there have been things that I thought about that I was like, well, that would be interesting for a one-off episode, and one of them I thought was LCD gaming. Tiger Electronics and gaming watches.
Interesting. So here's the thing. That one I'll say I'm not as interested in, just for like lack of knowledge, but my like one little one-off story is I remember in like kindergarten sneaking one of those into my lunchbox. I wasn't supposed to, and they're terrible. And it just started like making noise in the car, and I got busted.
You know what's funny is I have the sounds of the baseball game, the
Beep,
Tiger
beep,
Electronics baseball. Beep,
boop,
beep,
boop, boop.
beep, 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 beep. That was like if you strike out, and if you get the hit,
Yeah.
it was like bit, 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 and it would depend on how you moved around there. So that one I found it to be very interesting, primarily because they were re-released relatively. They've been like like the X-Men one was in Target not too long ago, and I was like, wow, what a stupid piece of shit this would be if you gave it to someone as a gift, because they'd be like, oh my god, I love this growing up, and you play it and you're like, I don't need this.
Agreed.
But that was one that had come across my mind. There's a lot that you could really talk about. Like I would a one-off episode on cereal mascots I think would be interesting.
You think? I mean that one is even larger than the tick with
It
what
is.
you could go into.
It's large, but you can pare it down into very short chunks. But from a research perspective, it's much larger. When you'd have to do like Tony the Tiger, Dig'em, Captain Crunch, all those things. Captain Crunch, who, by the way, most famous person that follows me on Twitter.
Captain Crunch follows you, like officially.
Crunch,
Unlike what is it? Ocean Spray doesn't just steal your content without following you, which is just
God
rude.
damn you,
Brand.
Ocean Spray. Yeah, but the blue check mark of Captain Crunch does follow me. Yeah,
So
and 5 Hour
you a
Energy. Those are my two big corporate follows.
because I actually like user engagement, and I'm going to be arrogant and say I think the tick hopefully wins in front of those two. Which one do you want to put up as your champion?
Whatever one you want, dude. Like this, because like there's so many one-off episodes that I could do that like, and again, when you look at like, if you look at the background that I'm bringing to the table, you could see that you could pluck one-off episodes off of half of the shit that's just behind me, or the stuff that you can't see in front of me, where it's like, oh, we could do, collectible plates.
Yeah, we were joking about that. I don't remember if it's on the recording, but pre-show we were joking about like if season 2 of this was like a Kaiser Soze situation where I was just looking behind you, going like He-Man and Star Wars, and you don't have anything Muppet behind you is the only reason that falls apart.
Yeah, there's no Muppets. I'm looking at like I have a bag of art right behind me. I have a
But I mean, you were talking kind of the George Lucas, engineering engagement and stuff. And I won't lie that I'm doing it there. Part of why I don't hate the poll thing is you basically do, not only do you get pre-engagement, which you've been very good at, you release, hey, coming out in 2 days, Amazing Jeff has cool friends. But then you also get people invested, because then if someone says, I really want to hear about, like I said, you get to choose one, LCD gamings or cartoon mascots. Then they're invested, and when it comes out, they're like, yes, mine won, or oh, mine lost. This is terrible. I have to see what it lost out to. That's my personal opinion, unless you really don't like the poll.
Does cereal mascots scare you because of the scope?
The scope it does, but I've said this about you on the show and just listening, like you are capable of taking many, many topics. That one we might have to do a little more structure to, right? That one we might have to, we're going to talk about these 5, bring them to the table and see there.
Yeah, who would be the big 5?
Might
Captain
be one
Crunch?
where I would.
Who would be the big 5?
Okay, so if I had to pick my cereal mascots, okay, you got the racist leprechaun, right? Because it's okay to just make fun of Irish people, apparently, right?
It still is, yes.
Yeah, you got a whole basketball team about it. You got Captain Crunch, Trix Rabbit, of course. Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs, Tony the Tiger.
Tony the Tiger, yes, but I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So
interesting.
Sunny.
Is he getting
Sunny?
cut?
I don't know if he would make the final.
Wow.
The Snap, Crackle, and Pop would be, I think.
All right, they would be in front. They're one.
I think
though.
Sunny is the B League. I think Sunny from Cocoa Puffs would be like with the Cookie Crook and the from Cookie Crisp, the cop and the cook. I think honestly, not for nothing, we might want to save that one for a
trilogy and
season.
Yeah.
Like, because now that we're looking at it, I'm like, man, I would, because you could do a whole episode on just the monster cereals.
And I also don't mind. That would be really good for Halloween. So you hate Halloween, but I think that's the one way we could bring Jeff into the Halloween.
Schedule that for October. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll put LCD gaming. So your Tiger Electronics, your Nintendo Game Watches, which should lose. I know that I'm bringing that to the table, but like that should lose, right?
I like that we've got a future, because we have one season. And what I would also like about the television mascots, because I mean, this is my personal goal, as long as the Nerd Podcast is released under your banner, which I hope, I either hope one of two things: you get too big, like, hey, we're too big for you. It should be awesome. That would mean something else. I'm not worried about that. Or two, some level of cross promotion, right? I don't hate that. And so, like I said, the next season we probably have planned. I don't even know if I'm going to bring a counter champion to the argument. I just want to coincide with some other content. And of course, one of your long run, you are a well-known advertising expert, which I guarantee you, we've talked offline a lot about this. I know for a fact that there is a lot of amazing advertising content you have. And like even some stuff that's the cutting room floor that I'm going to argue with you needs to be like, you need to do like a Jeff one-off episode or something on it, like the LDS commercials that you brought into my world. Look up Latter-day Saints lying commercials.
It's hard to live with a lie. My necklace.
Oh, God. Who
stole my necklace?
Oh my God.
I stole your necklace.
But basically, so some cross. So the I could see the cereal mascots being good cross promotion if there's more advertising content. So that could be a good future one. So I agree. So
well, I also feel like an 80s PSA. Nobody would listen to that. Maybe people would listen to that, but that would be an interesting one too. Is 80s? God damn it! The thing I love about this show is just how much stuff we can cover, and the thing I hate about it is we other than doing the Patreon exclusive episode 2 from this season, is that it's only a monthly show, and because I'm just like, we could do like 80s PSAs. That would be cool, right? And then it's just as you can see, my long-term goal is that, I want to both help this grow, help you grow. And then if there's more time for Jeff to produce content as opposed to having to, run a small business, and my condolences, I've done that. And it's a hell of a lot of fun. And oh, by the way, tax season's coming up in 2 months. So I hope you got your 1099 MISCs and receipts, Jeff. Good luck on that. Long term, hopefully there's room for that, but I'll have you put a poll out for LCD Electronics and the Tick. If you guys pick LCD Electronics over the Tick, what are you even doing here? But yeah, if you do it as like a rib, I'd also enjoy that too. It's interesting because that was Nintendo's real first foray into really video games.
It would be interesting to talk like Game & Watch and stuff, because I mean, I just know I know like briefly of it. We even brought up on the show that like wasn't even in my back pocket when I was talking history. So that works for me. All right. Head over to patreon.com/Jeff May to vote. Or if you're in the future, you can see what already won. I'm sure you picked wisely, and I would in no way try and influence the vote with the end. Anyway, enjoy.